smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome to Hour 3 of SportsGrid's Bracket Central Selection Sunday Special. He is the coach. That is JY James Young. I am Ben Stevens. The bracket was released about 2 hours ago. We are still ciphering through it all, where the seed lines match up, the tickets that have been punched in the path through the madness that is the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament. So, JY, let's go back to the very top of this field of 68. Those 4 teams on the one line. UConn, the number 1 overall seed in the 2024 NCAA Tournament, followed by Houston, Purdue, and North Carolina. UConn in the East, Houston the 1 seed out in the South region, Purdue the 1 seed in the Midwest, North Carolina that 4th and final spot on the one line, that number 1 seed in the West region.
Yeah, I mean, if you keep looking at it, folks, they're the 3 heavyweights, obviously, in UConn and Houston and Purdue, and the preeminent favorites because of the style of play and how they played during the course of the year. It's going to come down to, folks, what we get out of North Carolina. I think that's the question that everybody's trying to figure out, and I think that's the bracket in the West that's going to probably cause the most heartache or the most chaos or the most, you don't know what the hell is going to go on, because there could be upsets anywhere, and you could look at a West bracket. Can you make a case that Carolina gets there? Yes. Can you make a case that Arizona gets there? Yes. Baylor? Yes. Alabama, if they could stop anybody? Yeah. Yes. So you have 14 right there. Can Michigan State beat North Carolina? Absolutely. So you can go on and on and on with matchups. Can New Mexico make a run? I think so. So to me, it's going to be a very interesting bracket. I think that's the one where you got to, as we bring in our radio audience, Bracket Central Coach Young and Ben Stevens, that is the region, Ben, out of all of them, that's going to cause, I think, the most chaos.
And we're starting to get those odds out for Sweet 16 runs to reach the Final Four. That's the winner of whatever respective region you are in around the NCAA tournament. Arizona, despite being the 2 seed in this region, is actually the favorite to emerge in Phoenix, which would be some home floor advantage for the Cats, where the Final Four is out of the West. It's plus 260 for Arizona to win the West. It's plus 460 for North Carolina. Arizona 15-1 to win the title, 18-1 for UNC, a little bit behind. So those are the heavyweights. Those are the top teams. Those are the 4-1 seeds, and then a little bit beyond as we went region by region. Now let's make some cases for the long shots, because, JY, when you think of March Madness, we love that idea of chaos, of insanity, of that very term, madness. Which Cinderellas, which long shots in this NCAA tournament field do you think can make a run deep into the big dance and maybe cause some of that chaos in the opening weekend or two?
I'm going to give you one that I'm just falling in love with this team, and it's New Mexico. I just think the way that Richard Pitino has his team playing, particularly outside the pit, and their odds to win the national championship, folks, at 75-1. To me, offensively, they just do enough at the 72nd percentile. You know, they don't do a lot of things that I would say that are deficient. If you look at the play types, how they get into their offense, there's nothing that is poor except for isolation basketball, and that's 2.9% of their possessions. They shoot the ball well, but then if you start to look at the other side, on the defensive end of the floor, that's where you see a lot of excellence. Field goal percentage, there's 86th percentile. Jump shots, 96th percentile. So to me, you look for a sleeper team that has the metrics offensively and defensively, Ben, that can make a run. To me, it's the Lobos of New Mexico.
When you look at the metrics for New Mexico as well, to highlight your point here, JY, New Mexico ranks in the top 25 of the net, 22nd. They won the Mountain West Conference tournament title. The selection committee told us, had the Lobos not made that run in their own conference tournament, they might not be dancing into the NCAA tournament, which I think would be false, but New Mexico proved that, of course. They were the 6th seed in a very competitive Mountain West Conference tournament and made it all the way to the championship game, knocking off San Diego State under in 5 of their final 6 games before the big dance. The reason I highlight that, a little bit of a juxtaposition. Mexico plays at a very fast pace, 8th fastest in the country, but a top 25 defense around the nation as well. An 11 seed in the West region, but it's 75-1 to win a national championship. It pairs up very well with a Cinderella team, but as the odds makers see it, optimistic on their price. We have seen 5 11 seeds in the history of the Big Dance advance to a Final Four. It is not out of the realm of imagination. I'll go with my shorter long shot to begin, the 10 seed in the East region. That would be Drake. Now, these are the national championship prices at 150-1 for the Bulldogs to get all the way there. I believe it's 150-1. Yes, it is 150-1 for Drake. But I think they draw a very interesting portion to start off that opening weekend, JY. They are in Omaha in their opening round of 64 game, taking on the 7 seed Washington State. A team that the metrics do not love, a team that booked as a favorite, has not really lived up to expectation, but Wazoo under Kyle Smith, deserving of this berth out of the Pac-12, just their first NCAA tournament trip since 2008. If Drake is able to get past the Cougars of Wazoo, who would more than likely be there in the round of 32, that would be Iowa State, the 2 seed in the East region. That game would be in Omaha. Just to the neighboring state to the east, that is Iowa, a showdown between Drake from Des Moines and the Cyclones from Ames. I think Drake, with where things stand in the bottom portion, JY, of that East region, might be able to make a run to the second weekend in the Sweet 16.
Folks, and they could score. 98th percentile offensively. They could score in the half court. If you look at their metrics, according to Synergy, everything they do offensively is in the 70th percentile or higher. That bodes well. They knock down shots. Listen, folks, 91st percentile in spot-up jumpers. So if you give them looks, they don't miss. That's going to be a trendy pick, Drake.
Drake right now 43-1 to win the East region. That would be a Final Four appearance. You might have some opportunities, though, if you sprinkle on a long shot number that if they continue to survive and advance, which is the name of the game in the NCAA tournament, you could cash out that number and maybe make some profits. Here's another team, JY, that you mentioned earlier, and I think is worth repeating. That would be McNeese, a 30-win team, the champions of the Southland, under Will Wade, who is a great basketball coach, but has a certain reputation around him for some recruiting violations. But with where things are in college basketball, in the NIL era, maybe Will Wade's not that bad of a guy, despite what the sanctions might say. McNeese, 500-1 to win the national championship. They open up in the round of 64 against Gonzaga. It is the 5-12 matchup in the Midwest region.
I think you like teams that could score the ball, Ben.
I do.
I'm starting. You know what? We were friends for a couple of years, and I'm starting to figure out. How about McNeese State? 97th percentile offensively, 96th percentile in transition, 92nd percentile in half-court offense, and all their shooting metrics are all great. So that's another pick. McNeese State can actually score the ball.
Gonzaga can play. We know that for sure. McNeese at plus 920 to reach the Sweet 16. Again, some of these long shot prices that you hope to have an opportunity to hedge out from to make you some money. It's not just about your bracket. It's your bets in the futures along the way by the time we get to this stage in March. More Bracket Central coming your way next.
The Bostonian versus the book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This
is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to
Penn
find
State's
a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But
Right.
if we make them a third,
They get in.
this
is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8 point dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5 point underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you on it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked if they won it. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes, and they actually played, I guess you would call it somewhat defense.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
And a Cinderella run in March Madness, which is what we love out of the NCAA tournament. Indiana State should be in the big dance. I hope the selection committee follows.
Depending on what bracket they end up on, they could really make a strong case to win the national championship. Hence why their odds keep getting shorter, and shorter.
Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the
All
rim.
you've heard me say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Hour number 3 of SportsGrid's Bracket Central Selection Sunday Special. He's the coach. That's JY. I am Ben Stevens. Now we go region by region throughout the entirety of the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament as we continue our bracket breakdown. JY, we start at the top here. This left upper hand portion, that would be the East region, where the reigning national champions and the number 1 overall seed in the 2024 field of 68, the Connecticut Huskies reside. They open up against Stetson, a 26.5-point favorite. They have made their way, after winning a national championship, to a regular season crown in the Big East, a Big East tournament title for the first time since 2011 as well. Where do you think Dan Hurley's Huskies are entering the big dance?
Playing better than anybody in the country. And honestly, folks, I don't know if it's even close, especially what you saw out of Purdue and Houston over the weekend. And if you've seen Dan Hurley, they have this poster that has all their goals. Dan Hurley wants to win everything. That was their biggest regular season, the tournament, and now March Madness. Yeah. They're playing better than anybody. And I think, Ben, as we go through it, their path, at least to the Elite Eight, looks pretty good.
They do have a very difficult 4 seed that awaits in Auburn, who opens as a 12.5-point favorite against the champions of the Ivy, and a wild finish in the Ivy League tournament title game against Brown. 12.5-point favorite for Auburn in that opening round of 64 game. We have 3 of the 4 Final Four teams from a season ago in the upper half of the East region. That would be UConn, the defending champs. FAU, who reached the Final Four, of course, as a 9 seed. They are now the 8 seed. San Diego State, that 5 seed as well. They came up short against Connecticut in that national championship game. JY, quickly, let's go to the bottom portion of the East region. Iowa State is the 2. There was a thought after winning the Big 12 tournament title, the Cyclones could be in the running for that number 1 seed in the West region. Instead, they're the 2 seed. They open as a 19.5-point favorite against the champions of the Summit League, South Dakota State.
Yeah, an Iowa State team that's really defending, and I kind of call them Houston light. Maybe I need to call Houston Iowa State light, the way they beat them down over the weekend. But when you look at this bottom half of the draw, I really want to highlight and focus on Illinois, an Illinois team that really, folks, to me is going to come down to they're going to score. Can they defend? Right. Can they get enough stops? But if you look at their pathway, they should be able to handle Morehead State and then BYU. And then that sets up could be a really intriguing matchup in the Sweet 16, either against Washington State or Iowa State, 2 teams that play extremely slow basketball.
JY's got his iPad. I have my phone, just trying to track all the updated spreads that you will see. 12.5-point number in favor of the Illini. They rolled in Minneapolis to a Big Ten tournament title. They can outscore anybody in the country. Can they defend? The Eagles of Morehead State, the champions of the Ohio Valley Conference, played a much slower tempo. From the East region, we go to the South. The number 1 seed in the South region, that is the Houston Cougars. They come up short in the Big 12 tournament title game, JY, do the Cougs against Iowa State, but they will open round of 64 action against Longwood, the champions of the SoCon. Houston booked as a 23.5-point favorite.
Sorry, Longwood. Thank you for showing up. You get an angry Houston team in the first round, a team in Longwood that doesn't perform well in the tournament versus a very angry Kelvin Sampson group.
Yeah.
I don't think 23 points is enough, Ben. I'm going to be laying it with the Cougars.
Can't wait to see what that total opens up as well for a Houston team that is second best offensively around the country in college basketball. Nebraska and Texas A&M, the Trev Alberts Bowl, Nebraska's former AD earlier this week, shocking many in collegiate athletics, taking the open athletic director job in College Station for A&M. Nebraska into the tournament for the first time since 2014, looking for its first ever win in the Big Dance in program history. And I think, JY, as you look at the 12-5 spots that we love to highlight in terms of those upset specials, many will have their eye on that matchup in the South, James Madison and Wisconsin. The Dukes, JMU, out of the Sun Belt, just a 4.5-point dog.
And that's interesting, only a 4.5-point dog in a 5-12 game, folks. That's because this team won 31 games. They did beat Michigan State to start the season, and their offense is going to give Wisconsin fits. And I think that's why you will see this as the 5-12, one of the more popular 12 to beat the 5s is going to be JMU. And a JMU team that, let's be honest, folks, Duke has not looked impressive, down the stretch. We've talked about it. Vermont could pick them off. Could you see JMU all the way to the Sweet 16?
The Blue Devils, an 11.5-point favorite against the Catamounts, who have been to the NCAA tournament 5 of the previous 7 years. As we look at the bottom portion of the South region, Kentucky, the 3 seed, taking on Oakland. Texas Tech is in the Big Dance as well against an NC State team that is getting hot at the right time. They won all 5 games on their run through the ACC tournament and a championship to steal one of those bids and earn an automatic berth to the Big Dance.
Yeah, this is going to be an intriguing spot because you're dealing with questions here, right? In regards to NC State, can they keep it up? Kentucky, will they defend? Florida, will they defend? Which team comes out of this match between Boise State and Colorado? Each one of them can beat Florida. And then the big question is Tyler Kolek's health. This is an intriguing part of the bracket here. Yeah. And if you start looking at the numbers here on FanDuel, you have Kentucky right now at plus 850 to win this region. This is intriguing, folks, because if Kolek's not healthy, you could see a pathway all the way to the Elite Eight for the Kentucky Wildcats.
Houston, the favorite to get to the Final Four at plus 160. Total already out, by the way, for Kentucky and Oakland. The Grizz, the champions of the Horizon, 168.5 offense expected for the round of 64 opener. From the South region, we go down. The Midwest region, in the number 1 seed, that would be the Purdue Boilermakers. Of course, last year as a 1 seed, knocked off by Fairleigh Dickinson, looking to flip the script this time around. Purdue will await the winner of the 16 play-in game between Grambling and Montana State. For Purdue, JY, it's getting to the Final Four. It is changing that narrative. The Boilermakers have not been to the Final Four since 1980, 43 years ago.
Listen, I don't care, and I'll be honest with you, no one cares what Purdue has done to this point. Not even the loss to Wisconsin. Nobody cares. It's about this. This is what it's about. And to me, I think Purdue is going to come out aggressive and angry early on. And I think if you look at this pathway, now TCU could pose some problems, okay, if they beat Utah State, which I'm not even sure that's even going to happen. Yeah. But this Purdue team should roll their way through. Watch out for this Kansas-Sanford matchup. Obviously, we talked about the injuries to McCullough and obviously Hunter Dickinson. Sanford can shoot the ball extremely well from 3. This could be a huge upset here. And don't sleep on McNeese State. So you could have 2 Cinderella teams right here, a 12 versus 13 maybe playing for a spot to go to the Sweet 16.
McNeese, 6.5-point underdog against Gonzaga. Samford against a banged-up Kansas team. That line right now, 7.5 in favor of KU. Tennessee is the 2 seed in the bottom portion of this bracket, JY. Only about $1 behind Purdue, plus 195 for the Boilers to reach the Final Four out of the Midwest. Tennessee plus 310, but that Creighton team sitting with the 3 spot in this Midwest region also has your attention.
They have my attention, folks, but a real reason why Creighton has my attention is because of what Tennessee and Rick Barnes has not done in his career in the NCAA tournament. They've come up short in all of his stops that he's had, although he's taken, I think, 4 teams to the tournament. Yeah. He has still struggled in the big dance. But to me, Creighton-Akron is an intriguing matchup. If Creighton moves on, we can see something. And then obviously we've all talked about this South Carolina-Oregon game. Can Dana Altman's team continue what they've done?
The Ducks open up as a very short 1.5 underdog against the Gamecocks. Our 4th and final region, as we continue to spin it around, we go out west. North Carolina is the 1 seed, but they are not favored to win the West region and advance to the Final Four in Phoenix. It would be a homecoming according to the odds makers. Arizona has the best price, the 2 seed in the West, plus 260.
Pure chaos. They could win it. They could win it. They could win it. They could win it as the 11th seed. Grand Canyon would upset over St. Mary's. Buckle up in the West.
It is going to be a very uncertain top half. North Carolina looking for that redemption tour. They made it to the national championship game 2 seasons ago. Last year's the preseason number 1, failed to reach the big dance. As you look at Arizona down here, they open as a 19.5-point favorite in the round of 64 against Long Beach State. How did we get this bracket? Mike DeCourcy tells us next.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This
is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
This
is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8-point dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5-point underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you won it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked if they won it. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes, and they actually played, I guess you would call it, somewhat defense.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
And a Cinderella run in March Madness, which is what we love out of the NCAA tournament. Indiana State should be in the big dance. I hope the selection committee follows.
Depending on what bracket they end up on, they could really make a strong case to win the national championship. Hence why their odds keep getting shorter, and shorter.
Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart Team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Live right here on SportsGrid's Bracket Central Selection Sunday Special. It's Ben Stevens. It's James Young. And joining us now, it is a bracketologist for Fox Sports doing great work for the sporting news as well. You see him each and every week all across the SportsGrid network. Mike DeCourcy joins us live right here on Selection Sunday. There he is popping up in the graphic behind us. Mike, we appreciate you taking some time on what is a busy Selection Sunday to help us work through the bracket and see where some of those discrepancies lie and, of course, paint the path through a run in this NCAA tournament.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I am still befuddled by some of what was done in the seeding process. Yeah. The selection process, I was not surprised by what they did. I will tell you that usually the last bracket is not that difficult because everything seems to have coalesced by that point. There's a few things to tweak and to scrub through, and but this one, when I started last night, I did the first 9 lines, and then I started to realize that with everything that happened at the bottom of the bracket, I was going to have to build the bottom of the bracket up to the middle, because there were teams that won. What do you do with the Atlantic 10 winner, which at that point was projected to be VCU? Where do they fit? Where does a UAB winning the American Conference fit? And all those things that happened, NC State. And so I started working my way up to the middle, and it's like a slow motion car crash. Like you could see all the teams that thought that they were in, and in a reasonable year would have been St. John's, Seton Hall, teams like that. All the teams that thought they were in Oklahoma, which was the one that I got wrong on my projection. You could just see it squeeze, and it felt like, can I stop this somehow? But you can't.
Yeah. So many bid stealers throughout a very chaotic conference tournament week. Does it set up even more madness in the big dance? So, Mike, as we get to see the bracket, as the field of 68 starts to be revealed, of course, everybody looks at the bubble and what available spots still remain in the NCAA tournament. Were you surprised by any of the teams that made it into the field of 68 or some that were left out of this year's NCAA tournament bracket?
Yeah, my final projected bracket for Fox had 67 of the 68 correct. The one I got wrong was Oklahoma. The one in terms of I had included, and then the team that was included by the committee was Virginia. And I was surprised by that. I thought that Virginia had made a pretty clear statement about its entire season, really, that they were a fine team but more in inclusion. And they managed to select them anyway. I could see where they didn't like Oklahoma because I didn't love their resume, but I don't like Virginia's resume more than Oklahoma's, and I don't like it better than a lot of teams that were left out, including from their own conference, Pitt. I kind of figured the committee would see Virginia as superior to Pitt, but if you're choosing between the two of them, I thought Pitt had a better season.
And I agree, Mike. I think Virginia is going to be the one that everyone's going to talk about. And, of course, Coach Bennett can silence all the critics by making some kind of run here. And I think, to me, maybe this is my New Jersey bias and my friendship with some of these guys, but I thought Seton Hall should have gotten in. I thought their win versus UConn was big. I know Don McClain got hurt that game, but you can look at them beating Marquette at home. The triple overtime game versus Creighton, beating St. John's twice. I thought Shaheen had done enough, and it's interesting enough to watch a league like the Big East have a 1, a 2, a 3, and then no one else. So that was pretty interesting to me. What do you got, Ben?
It really was. So, Mike, it's not just the teams that were into the tournament or the teams that were left out, but how the selection committee slotted each and every team in the field of 68 throughout the bracket. Were there any seed surprises, any discrepancies there that really caught your eye as well?
Yeah, it looks like this. just about the entire bracket were seed surprises. It started, I believe, at the 5 line where they included Gonzaga and St. Mary's. I thought St. Mary's was only a line off that, but Gonzaga, I thought I was all ready to put Gonzaga on the 5 line if they won the St. Mary's game in the WCC final. They didn't. They weren't even really all that close. Yeah. I don't know what they did to warrant the 5 seed on the course of this season. Predictive metrics, I guess, and the Kentucky win, but I don't think that's enough, because if you're just going to go by the metrics, I can point out lots of examples of where they didn't follow them at all. I thought those were really bizarre. I thought that Dayton getting a 7 was bizarre. I mean, Dayton was lucky to be in the field, let alone be seeded as high as a 7. Dayton lost the most difficult games they played, almost start to finish. In their conference, the tough road games, they took the L. They get into the conference quarterfinals. They play Duquesne, which ends up winning the tournament. But at that point, Duquesne was coming in as a 6 seed that wasn't really viewed as a threat to win that championship, but Dayton opened the door. I don't know how you go through all of that, all those losses against significant teams or the most significant teams you play, and wind up with a 7 seed. That was befuddling. And then New Mexico, which was always kind of a bubble team, I'll admit. Yeah. And I had them out of the field or right on the edge of the field as this week was transpiring. But then they went out and they dominated in the conference tournament. They won game after game after game in the Mountain West. And then they stick them with an 11 seed. I just really had a hard time understanding what the committee's rationale was for the seeds that they put up on the board. I've done this now. This is my 4th bracket with Fox that that got through the process. I also started in 2020 when we didn't have a show. We didn't have a tournament. But this was by far the one that was seeded the most bizarrely to me.
Yeah.
Mike, two-part question for me. Number one, give us a team, a mid-major team to watch, someone that maybe people haven't really watched or looked at this year that can make a run. And then 2, Kansas. I think they become such an intriguing team because of the injuries, but also the fact that they didn't really play well down the stretch even before the injuries took place. What is your thoughts on the Kansas Jayhawks in this tournament?
Yeah, Kansas is a tough team to gauge because I had the shoulder injury to Hunter Dickinson that he sat out from the Big 12 tournament, the one game they wound up playing. I think he'll be better. Shoulders can often be put together well enough for guys to be able to play and be successful as long as he's not doing any more damage, and they won't let him go out there if he were. The problem is Kevin McCullough has not been himself for the most part. I think he has a lower leg injury of some sort and has really not been nearly what he had been, and they need him. They don't have enough beyond him. You saw it in the Cincinnati game in the Big 12 tournament. Without both of them, they just didn't have anything. But they don't have enough offense to take some pressure off of players like Johnny Furphy, who has been really poor, who had gotten really good in the middle of the year. He was regularly producing double-figure points. And then as soon as the McCullough distraction, so to speak, was taken out of their offense and people decided to start guarding Furphy, he can't score. So that's a lot of trouble for a team like Kansas. But if they're both healthy, they could make a run. I don't know how far, but they are capable of beating Purdue in the Sweet 16. So if you could do that, you certainly could beat anybody else in your bracket.
The Jayhawks a 7.5-point favorite for a tricky round of 64 game against the 13 seed Samford in the Midwest. So, Mike, the 4 number 1 seeds in the 2024 NCAA Tournament. UConn, the number 1 overall seed. Houston, the top seed in the South region, followed by Purdue in the Midwest. And there was some conversation about who would be the 4th and final team on that 1 line. Many thought after Iowa State won the Big 12 tournament, the Cyclones might slot into that 4th and final 1 seed. The committee decides it's North Carolina. Do you think the committee made the correct decision?
I do. There were a couple of reasons for that. Iowa State played one of the weakest non-conference schedules in the entire country. It ranked in the 300s. I don't know the exact number, but there's 360 teams. So if you're in the 300s, you're scraping the bottom, certainly. And that was what Iowa State chose to do with this team. Now, I'm not critical of that. I think you schedule to whatever you think your team needs to be in peak condition, to be in peak running form when you start your conference play. That's what you're out there to do. And if it costs you a seed line, if you're at the top of the field, okay. And if it costs you getting in at the bottom of the field, as happened to Pitt, it's your problem. You have to deal with it. You have to live with the way you chose to schedule. And in this case, Iowa State chose that schedule. Okay, but you can't have a 1 seed with that schedule. Even as good as the Big 12 is, you can't have a 1 seed in which the best non-conference opponent you played was probably Iowa, which wasn't anywhere. I guess you could say they were near the field if you want to be really generous. But in reality, when the committee was talking, if the word Iowa came up without state attached to it, it didn't last very long on the board.
And interesting enough, at Iowa State, I think they were a double loser. Not only did they not get a 1 seed, they probably got the worst 2 seed and have to deal with UConn down the stretch. Ben, what do you have?
19.5-point favorite for the Cyclones in the round of 64 opener. Mike, there's a chance that even in Omaha, not all that far away from Iowa, it could be Iowa State and Drake in the round of 32. Mike DeCourcy, Fox Sports bracketologist, joining us here on this Selection Sunday to tell you how the field of 68 came together and some of those seed discrepancies that we will see in the NCAA tournament. I'm sure we'll hear from Mike throughout this week here on the SportsGrid Network. Mike, we appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your Selection Sunday.
Thanks, guys.
We'll talk very, very soon. So, JY, as we continue to go around Bracket Central, Selection Sunday Special here on SportsGrid, we'll look at the field of 68. We'll look at the bracket. We will see how the march through the madness plays out. Who might be that first number 1 seed bounced out of the big dance? Who could maybe make a deep run and provide you some value along the way? And some names to pay attention to. Those best individual stars stepping up on the brightest stages here in the month of March. Come back and join us. SportsGrid's Bracket Central Selection Sunday Special rolls on.
The Bostonian versus the book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8-point dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5-point underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you won it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked if they won it. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes, and they actually played, I guess you would call it somewhat defense.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
And a Cinderella run in March Madness, which is what we love out of the NCAA tournament. Indiana State should be in the big dance. I hope the selection committee follows.
Depending on what bracket they end up on, they could really make a strong case to win the national championship. Hence why their odds keep getting shorter, shorter, and shorter.
Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart Team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Now it is time to pave the path through all the chaos that you will see over the next 3 weeks in the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament. It is called March Madness. Now we march through that madness. We'll give you some picks. We'll look at some teams and some names you must know before you fill out that bracket and before you get all of your bets in for the round of 64 and beyond. So, JY, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to look at the first number 1 seed that could be bounced early in the big dance. We're going to look at a team that we think with conviction can make a run into the second weekend, at least to the Sweet 16, and maybe a candidate for the most outstanding player in the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament. We start with the number 1 seed you think might exit earliest. Of the 4, Houston, Purdue, UConn, and North Carolina. Who gets bounced first?
Well, I'm going to go with probably the chalk pick here, and I'm going to go with North Carolina. I think this North Carolina team can really get picked off really in the second round. You could definitely see if Tom Izzo has his guys ready to play, you could see that there's a chance that they could go ahead and get an upset here. So North Carolina, the team that some people wondered was going to get a 1 seed, I think they're going to be the first 1 seed to be knocked out.
Yeah, I look at North Carolina's portion of the bracket in the West region. I don't think it's as bad up top. A round of 32 blue blood matchup against Michigan State could be intriguing. North Carolina will await the winner of Howard and Wagner in the opening first 4 game in Dayton. That's 16 seed versus 16 seed battle. I'm going to go the opposite of chalk. I'm going to go with the reigning national champs and the favorites to make it 2 straight in 2024. That would be the Connecticut Huskies. The best number to cut down the nets at plus 420. The 1 seed I think could get bounced first. And here is why. I just think there is the opportunity for it on the horizon. Will it happen? I'm not so sure. But when I look at the 4 seed in that round of 16 game, the second weekend, I think Auburn is a team that maybe some overlook. Veteran-laden, led by Janai Broome, one of the best and most versatile players in the SEC. Katie Johnson is there as well. And Bruce Pearl has been to NCAA tournaments a time or 2. I think this Auburn team, both with what they can do on the defensive side of the basketball, could frustrate a UConn team looking to go back-to-back for the first time since Florida did so in 2006 and 2007. And, oh, by the way, only 3 number 1 overall seed since the committee designated a top overall team in the tournament starting in 2014 has ever won the national championship. I think UConn, making a little bit of headway here, JY. I think UConn will be the first number 1 seed to exit the 2024 NCAA tournament.
You know, Ben, when you think about it, it's all about 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And in 40 minutes, can a team like Auburn beat UConn? You can make a case that, yes, they have the size, the athleticism, the guard play, and the coach. So they have the recipe that can make a run in this tournament. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's UNC, maybe because I think UNC may get picked off in the round of 32. Right. You like they may get UConn getting them knocked off in the round of 16. I do think that's intriguing. I think it's something people want to consider because that could be a value pick for a team like Auburn.
And I will just say this based on the odds, 5-1 number for Auburn to reach the Final Four, tied for the second best in the East region, alongside the 2 seed in the region. That's Iowa State. Connecticut is favored at a plus 120 number to emerge out of the East region and into the Final Four in Phoenix. But interesting to see the team that would stand in their way more than likely, Auburn on the 4 line, tied for that second best price. Now let's talk a team that can make a run here in the madness. A Sweet 16 team, JY, that catches your eye. Maybe not all the way to the Final Four, but at least into the second weekend.
It's minus 142, so we're not talking value here. But I'm going to go with Illinois. I think this Illinois team, if Brad Underwood can fix the defensive deficiencies, I guess I would say, they have the offensive capability, and they have an absolute star, Terrence Shannon Jr. If you saw what he did in the Big Ten tournament, I think scoring over 100 points in the 3 games, literally putting the team literally on his back. Kind of like I remember another guy that did this, took a team on national championship. What's his name? Glenn Rice, another Big Ten guy that kind of did that. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win a national championship here. That's high praise with Glenn Rice. But to me, I think Illinois actually finds a way to go all the way to the Elite Eight.
It is interesting when you look at the Illini. Under Brad Underwood, there have been some questions about their overall outlook. Illinois, of course, in the last 3 NCAA tournaments, has not seen the second weekend. They have not reached even the Sweet 16. The last time Illinois did that was way back in 2005, now nearly 2 decades ago. But when you look at the draw for the Illini, where they stand in the East region, again, that would be on the bottom half of the bracket, where Iowa State is that 2 seed. I'm going to give you not a minus money price to reach the Sweet 16, but I'm going to give you a big plus money number at 50 to 1. That would be James Madison, 12 seed in the South region of the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament. I think JMU, as a 4.5-point dog in its opening round of 64 game against Wisconsin, is very live for that money line upset. I talked about how I would put Duke on upset alert as well in the 4-13 matchup. The Blue Devils, an 11.5-point favorite against Vermont. But the Catamounts have been here time and again. If that happens, or even if it is the 4 seed in Duke, JY, I think James Madison can knock them off. There are 2 teams in this field of 68 that will enter having won more than 30 games, both with 31. That would be the defending champs and the number 1 overall seed in Connecticut, and it would be James Madison, the champions out of the Sun Belt. Only one quad 1 win for JMU, but it came in their season opener on the road in East Lansing against Michigan State. Not many teams wanted to play the Dukes this year, JY, and for good reason. Now they have no choice but to see them in the big dance. I think James Madison can go on a run 50 to 1 to reach the Sweet 16.
And the thing that I like about James Madison, Ben, is they have depth. Right, if you look at this team, I do think they have like 7 or 8 guys that get you at least 6.5 points per game. They have all those guys play at least 15 minutes, and then you look at obviously a guy like Terrence Edwards at the guards by giving you 17.4, and then the junkyard dog in TJ Bickerstaff that does a little bit of everything for this team. And if you look at it, you're absolutely right. Regardless of I think they win their first round matchup, but regardless of who comes out of that Vermont Duke game, you got to think Duke hasn't been consistent, right? And if Duke does lose, you still got to like JMU over a team like UVM. So that is a good pick there with James Madison.
Since the field expanded, we love to look at those 12-5 upsets, and the field expanded to 64, now 68, way back in 1985. We've actually seen more 11 seeds over 6 seeds in the round of 64, around a 38% clip, than 12 over 5, about 35%. But there's a couple of spots throughout this bracket. You would look at James Madison in the South region as a 12 seed. McNeese in the Midwest against Gonzaga as that 12-5 matchup, and certainly Grand Canyon and St. Mary's in that West region. GCU 29 wins, McNeese 30. At the end of the day, winning basketball games pays off in the month of March. Now let's look at your most outstanding player pick, JY. No odds out just yet, but we can certainly correlate to those national championship odds.
Well, it's pretty simple. You're going to kind of figure out who we think are going to win a national championship, right? And I'm going to go with Tristan Newton of UConn, obviously getting you about 15.2 points per game, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. And the engine of this team, and the fact that the way that he can impact the game on the defensive end and offensive end, and the fact that they're running a lot of this pick and roll with him and Donovan Clingan, I think that this guy, if you look at this team and you think that UConn is going to win the national championship, then you got to go with the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands the most. That's Tristan Newton.
When those odds come out, I wonder how many UConn players will be in the top 20, top 25, because Tristan Newton is the guy for Dan Hurley's Huskies that does a little bit of everything. And, of course, UConn, its first Big East tournament title since 2011, its first Big East regular season championship since the late 90s. In that span, since 1999, when the Huskies prior to this year last won the Big East in the regular season, they'd won 5 national championships. They enter as the national title favorites at plus 420. So we'll get into our national championship picks before we round out the show, but I think we're peeling back the curtain just a little bit. I have Purdue to win a national title. I've had the Boilermakers for the last month and a half. I believe this is the year Purdue changes the narrative and follows a similar script to what we saw with Virginia. We'll point out some of those similarities in just a little bit. If Purdue's winning a national championship, Zach Edey is going to win the most outstanding player. Is he the most important player for Purdue to get there? I actually would argue it's Braden Smith, or a Fletcher Lawyer, or a Lance Jones, or a Mason Gillis being that true X factor for Purdue. But Zach Edey, if it's a magical run in March for Purdue, is going to win most outstanding player, and more than likely JY is on his way to winning his second consecutive National Player of the Year award, the first player in men's college basketball to pull off that feat since Ralph Sampson with Virginia in the early 1980s.
And obviously, Zach Edey, the most dominant force in college basketball that we've seen in a long time. And you're right. He will be the most outstanding player, but he's going to need help. I cannot stress it enough. And Ben just talked about it. Lawyer, Jones, Smith, Gillis, their ability to shoot the ball from three. And here is the biggest thing, folks, that you got to watch. How will the referees call the game? Because you know Zach Edey will set that high ball screen at a dribble handoff. He will roll you down to what we call the hole, which is right outside the charge circle, where Zach Edey can catch the ball, and he prefers to go over his left shoulder with the jump hook. He only goes over his right shoulder when he's on the block, when he has to go to the middle of the floor. So to me, if you have referees call the game the way it should be called, and they allow these kids, and he's able to get to the free throw line, which he shoots at a high clip, and then you get the guards to then knock down shots, those things happen. You could honestly say that Purdue can win a national title.
It's very interesting because in the Big Ten, many think that Zach Edey and Purdue have a very favorable whistle. It is unique. It is different. He is 7'4". There is no other player in the country much like Zach Edey. But we will see how the tournament referees that Purdue team and Zach Edey, which could be a big difference. No Big Ten team, by the way, has won a national championship since Michigan State did so in 2000. Final four picks. It is time. JY, go region by region and tell us who was left standing in Phoenix.
In the East, I'm going to go with UConn, the Purdue favorite to win a national championship. To the South, I'm sticking chalk. I'm going with Houston. I just think this team is going to be angry, and they're going to be in a really bad mood after getting blown out to Iowa State. In the Midwest, Purdue. I think this is when they could really get a redemption of what is going on. And then in the West, going with Baylor. I think the West is going to be absolutely wild. I think you can make a case of about 5 or 6 teams winning it. And I just think at the end of it, playing that Big 12 schedule will help them out. In the end, I picked Baylor at 6-1 to come out of the West.
So let me start then in the Wild, Wild West as well with a pick I think you might enjoy. The Lobos of New Mexico at 13-1 to reach the Final Four. Every year, JY, since 2013, we have seen a seed at 5 or lower, 5, 6, 7, 8, and beyond, reach the Final Four. Every single year. That means that when you fill out your bracket, make sure that somebody seeded 5 or lower is in your Final Four left standing, surviving and advancing all the way to Phoenix. For me, I think it's New Mexico at 13-1. I think Purdue is going to win a national championship, so they have to get out of the Midwest. 2-1 price on the Boilermakers. I think Houston will win the South region. It's a plus 160 number. And in the East, I got to pay attention to those Auburn Tigers. A 5-1 number on Auburn to get past UConn, more than likely in the Sweet 16, and into the Final Four. Those are Final Four picks. We'll give you who we think is going to cut down the nets as a national champion in our round of 64 best bet for one final segment on the other side.
The Bostonian versus the book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn
always
State rule.
going to be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8 point dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5 point underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you won it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked if they won it. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes? And they actually played, I guess you would call it somewhat defense.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
And a Cinderella run in March Madness, which is what we love out of the NCAA tournament. Indiana State should be in the big dance. I hope the selection committee follows.
Depending on what bracket they end up on, they could really make a strong case to win the national championship. Hence why their odds keep getting shorter, and shorter.
Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live, all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How else would you want us to close out SportsGrid's Bracket Central Selection Sunday special than with a best bet for the round of 64 and to make it certain and to make a statement, our national championship pick for the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament. He is the coach, JY James Young. I am Ben Stevens. JY, we start with the round of 64 that starts on Thursday. You and I will be live for the opening 3 hours of the NCAA Tournament, noon to 3 p.m. Eastern, in-game live, Bracket Central, reacting to all the live odds. But before we get there, we sweat out our bets. What is your best bet for the round of 64?
Very simple. Houston minus 23.5 versus Longwood. You're going to get Houston off a 30-point loss. Good luck. I wouldn't want to be in those practices if I was those kids, and I definitely don't want to be Longwood. Give me Houston minus the points.
Houston, the top team in the South region. I go to the East region. Opening round action in Omaha. I think the 10 seed in that portion of the bracket, Drake, can make some noise, maybe even into the second weekend. But certainly as an underdog in their opener against Washington State, can be Drake plus 1.5 against Wazoo. Now, drum roll please. Brum. JY, in Phoenix, Arizona, on Monday, April 8th, who will be cutting down the nets as a national champ?
I'm going to go with chalk. I'm going to go with the UConn Huskies. They've been the best team all year. I think Dan Hurley wants us really bad. You could see a UNLV scenario where they're like the favorite and then get tripped up in the Final Four. I don't think it happens. UConn wins the national championship.
Connecticut will enter the big dance here in 2024 as the favorite. Plus 420 to go back-to-back. Looking to be the first repeat national champ in men's college basketball at the D1 level since Florida in 06 and 07. I have said it once. I will say it again. This is the Purdue team. This is the year to change the narrative. Purdue will win a national championship at a 7-1 price. We've only ever seen 2 1 seeds bounce by a 16 seed. In the previous time that team played the next year in the NCAA tournament, it was Virginia in 2019. Coach, what did they do?
won a national championship.
They won a national championship. He is James Young. I am Ben Stevens. Thanks for spending your Selection Sunday with us here on SportsGrid's Bracket Central. We'll see you this week for all the madness.